Even though the Camtasia Recorder application is a very simple and straightforward application, there are some options that are available to us that we can customize to better improve our own personal workflow, depending on the type of recording that you're going to be doing. Now, all the options that we're going to be looking at can be found here inside the Tools menu under Options. When the Options window opens up, we'll begin here on the General tab. The first things we can customize is whether or not we want to see any tooltips and whether or not we want to see the warning when the recorder is about to begin recording. I like to have these two options turned on, especially when I'm first getting started doing some recordings. After I've been recording for a while though, I'll tend to go in and uncheck these options so I'm not distracted by any tooltips or any warnings. The next section allows us to control how content is going to be captured. Whether or not we want to capture layered windows, meaning additional windows that may not be the frontmost window that we may be working with, whether or not we want to capture the keyboard input, whether or not we want to disable the screensaver during capture. This is a really important one to turn on unless you're trying to specifically show the screensaver as part of your recording. This way, if you end up talking for a few minutes and your screensaver is set to automatically come on within that time period, it won't interrupt your recording. Now, since we created a dedicated recording account and we set the default theme to not use Windows Aero theme, we don't need to worry about checking this box. However, if as part of your setup you were not able to create a dedicated recording account, this is a really good option to turn on so that when you go into your recording, you don't see any distractions from the Aero user interface. Next, we're able to set the default format that we want Camtasia to record in. And there's two options here, CamRec and AVI. We'll talk about these in more detail in a later movie. For now, just realize that CamRec allows you to edit your content directly in Camtasia Studio, whereas if you're planning on editing your content in another editing application, such as Adobe Premiere, Final Cut Pro, or an Avid video system, you may want to select the AVI format as the default. Next, let's go over to the Inputs tab. Here, we can set the frame rate that we want to capture our video recording at. The default is set to 30 frames, which, if you're trying to capture video or a lot of animations, you may want to go ahead and leave this frame rate set to a high level, such as 30 frames. The challenge here is that your video files will end up being quite large if you do this, and for most of your screen capture work, it's not going to be necessary. So, for most of my work, I tend to record at only 15 or even 10 frames per second. That will greatly reduce the file size of my video files, and it's still a high enough frame rate that I won't lose any of the action that I'm trying to capture on screen. One place that I do like to adjust my settings, though, is down here in the audio section under the Audio Settings button. The default setting is to record in the format of PCM and record at a rate of 22 kilohertz at 16-bit mono. I like to have my audio captured at a much higher rate, so let's go ahead and click the drop-down menu here and scroll down until you find 44.1 kilohertz 16-bit mono setting. Go ahead and select that and then click the OK button. This will capture our audio at a much better rate. The next tab allows us to set the hotkeys that we're going to be using to control Camtasia Recorder during our recording. The default settings for record, pause, stop, marker, and so forth can be seen by simply clicking on the listing for it, and you'll see the keyboard commands listed out here. The default settings generally work for most applications, but you may find yourself in a situation where, say, the F10 key is already used as part of your application, and you need to choose a different key. Many times, you can simply add a modifier key, such as Control or Control and Shift at the same time, in order to get around these limitations. I'm going to go ahead and click Restore Defaults to accept the default hotkey settings. Finally, let's go ahead over to the Program tab. Here are a couple of options for controlling things like forcing all of the pop-up windows or dialog boxes into a particular region. Now, this region is the area of our screen that is being recorded. This is a nice option to have turned on so that anytime a pop-up does show up and you're trying to capture that, it's forced to appear inside of your recording area. You can also check the box to force region to multiples of 4 if you've selected a custom screen size and you want to make sure that the recorded area is going to show up properly aligned to the pixels on your screen. Next, in the workflow area, you can choose whether or not you want to have the countdown timer to appear every time before you start recording. When you're first getting started doing screen recording, it's a good idea to go ahead and leave this countdown timer on. That way, it gives you a couple of extra seconds to get yourself ready to get into the recording. However, after you've been doing your screen recording for a while, you may find that you don't need that extra little help. And to speed up your recording process, you can come in here and uncheck this box. I'm going to go ahead and leave this option set for now for the purposes of the training video. The next option is a really nice thing because you can pause the recording in the middle of a recording using the F9 key and go ahead and make some changes on screen by having this next option set. When you restart the recording again using the F9 key, your mouse will automatically pop back to the last location of the recording. This will greatly help during the editing process so you don't have what we like to call mouse pops, where the mouse magically jumps from one spot of the screen to another during an edit. Finally, if you're recording multiple screencasts one after another, and you're not going to be doing any editing inside of Camtasia Studio itself in between times, it's a good idea to check this box and set the drop-down menu to save so that at the end of each recording, you can simply name your file and then go back into doing another recording right away. Since we'll be going in and doing a bunch of editing as part of this training, I'm going to go ahead and leave this option unchecked for right now, but just know that it's here. The last option to set is under the Minimize section, and this will dictate where the recorder is minimized to. The first option allows us to choose whether or not we want the recorder minimized during recording or not. I always like to have it set to if the recorder will be recorded, go ahead and minimize it. Now, where you want it to be minimized is either to the taskbar or to the system tray. I prefer having it minimized down to the system tray, which will tend to hide it over in the lower right-hand corner, and it will be less likely to be a distraction to any of my learners when I'm going in and switching applications inside my taskbar, because if the focus of my mouse is on the taskbar, then at least the recorder will be over in the system tray. With these setting changes complete, we'll go ahead and click the OK button. And now Camtasia Recorder is customized to our particular workflow that we're going to be using.